Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today for another episode of Page Chewing. And today, my guest is Lindz McLeod. Lindz, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
Oh, I really appreciate it. And we had to make sure the time changes because it's that time of year. So I appreciate your patience with me asking you 1,000 times, is this what time it is for you? So,
it is confusing, I admit. Mhm.
yeah, it's a little strange. Um, but I was, when I was preparing questions for you, I was looking to see, kind of get an idea of the kind of, the work you do and your past experiences in history. And you're very busy. You do a lot of work,
Yeah.
a lot of things. So, what can you tell us about you and your work?
Oh, geez, where to begin?
Yeah.
You're right. I do a lot of different things. I think one of the reasons that I do so many different things is I kind of feel that getting better in one field informs all of the other things I do. So I'm always kind of interested in trying new things. So I am a writer. I write novels and shorter works, as well as short stories and flash fiction, microfiction, and poetry. Um, and I also edit. I'm a writing coach. I'm a mentor to six extremely talented mentees who I enjoy cheerleading because they're all brilliant. Um, and I am a prolific tweeter of my cats as well, which I think is
Awesome.
the main reason that I have any followers, probably.
No, I don't know about that. But cats are the surefire way to for interaction sometimes, though. So it's kind of nice.
They
That's
earn their
yeah,
keep, kind of, kind
yeah, kind of.
of.
Yeah. And you also have an upcoming collection called Turduken, and that is available for pre-order now. That's released
Mhm.
on November 10th, so about a week or so. What can you tell us about that?
I'm really excited about Turducken. It is my first collection. And I think collections these days are quite a hard sell. But Stuart of Bear Creek approached me and said, I love what you do. Have you ever considered a collection? Because I will publish whatever you want. And I said, you will regret those words. But he did not. So the joke is on me. Turducken is. It was a really interesting thing to put together because I wanted it to be a selection of some of the best pieces that I've published over the last couple of years. But also, I wanted to make sure that there was enough new material in there so that people, didn't kind of feel like, oh, well, I could just read that on your website, which I keep relatively up to date. Um, so I wrote, there's a couple of stories in there which have never seen the light of day. To pretty much anyone. And there's some things that I wrote exclusively for this collection. One of the first things I had ever sent to Stuart was, and this is the pitch that I usually give people about this particular story. Um, it is about a thruple where at least one of them is not human and can only speak in Philip Pullman plot lines. And they proceed to have sex. And it is about as weird as that sounds, but it does work. And he said to me, I really love this throuple. Are you going to do anything else? And I thought, yeah, actually, I could. So there are two more stories about that throuple. And I got to be as weird as I like and do lots of odd little things. So for me, turducken, given that it is like a chicken inside a duck inside a turkey, it is the matryoshka of bird roasts. I thought, it would be nice if the collection was kind of like that. It's like one delight after another, all tucked in together. So it spans horror, literary. There is some fantasy in there as well. And there's definitely comedy. Some of it is very dark comedy, and some of it is a bit less so. Some of it is just straight comedy, some of it's like, wow, okay. But I had a lot of fun putting it together, and I'm really proud of it. And he did an amazing cover as well. I'm
Mm.
in love with the cover, just this
Yeah,
cosmic bird. Yeah.
yeah. Let me pull that up really quickly here. And I was wondering too about when you have a collection like this that it's lots of different types of stories.
Hmm.
How do you decide the order that the stories are in the
Oh,
book?
that took a while. That actually took longer than writing anything for it did, because I was being really obsessive, because um I didn't want to just front load with one thing or the other.
And there's
Yeah,
the
there, as,
cover.
as you
Yeah.
can see, yeah, the turducken. I love the fact that it also has two different feet.
Yeah.
There's something just really cute about it. Um, so I've tried to make sure that because it's quite a short collection, and a lot of my work that's included it is flash or shorter work. There's only a couple of longer pieces in there, and so I've tried to space those out, and have, like, a flash or a micro, and then a longer story, and then a flash. Kind of just so that the reader never feels like, oh, I've just finished one kind of 4,000 word story. Oh no, here's another one, and I
Yeah.
haven't really finished like absorbing the first one. I wanted it to be like a banquet where you're having little tasting dishes, and then you're eating like a full meal, and then you're tasting something else just to cleanse your palate. um and also because of the content of several of them. And this Scottish sun has chosen this moment to
Oh,
just blast right into my eyes. It's been raining for like a week, so thank you very much for that.
yeah.
But yeah, because of the content, I wanted to make sure that there were some serious pieces as well. And I didn't want you to kind of finish a very, very serious piece and then be immediately launched into something that was super funny. So I've also tried to keep the tone. It is probably still a roller coaster, but it is a more consistent roller coaster. There are probably no tracks missing. It took me a really long time to go back and forward and kind of. And again, because I mentioned the thruple stories as well. There's three of them, and I wanted to space those out
Hmm.
as well, so that you were kind of coming upon them unexpectedly as you were reading the other things.
Yeah. I always get fascinated by that. It's kind of like when you're listening to an album. For those of us who remember albums,
Mm.
the kind of like the order that the tracks are in an album, and it kind of reminds me of the kind of the same thing with a collection like this. Is how do you to kind of make it consistent?
Yeah, and I remember albums also, and
Yeah.
I think there's a. I also really liked albums which kind of felt like they were all one song.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like Mew did a great album called "In the Glass-Handed Kites," and then the Mars Volta tend to do stuff like that as well. And I kind of like the way that that works. So, there's definitely elements in these stories that hopefully feel like a kind of solid through line, even though they are really quite different stories from one to the next.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I did read that you read a lot of surrealism, and I was wondering how would you describe surrealism? Because it seems like everyone has a different definition of, or kind of what they consider to be surrealism.
Hmm. I think that's a hard question.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe it is more personal. Um, so for me, I think the title story, Turduken, which is the first one in the collection, is probably like my best example of that, apart from the thruple that I mentioned as well. Because Turduken is about someone who has uh, engineered a living turducken. So the chicken and the duck and the turkey are all alive inside each other, and thinking. It's a horrible kind of Franken chicken, and to me, this was this was really surreal because it was the idea that this thing that you normally see only when it's dead and done, uh, is actually alive, and how not just the turkey is alive and it has things stuffed inside it, but also the things that are stuffed inside it are alive as well. And they're thinking and they're trying to influence the turkey, who has overall control of the body, to do different things. Um, and there's something, I think, really funny and really horrible, but also really poignant about it. And I think maybe those are the things that I would look for in surrealism that I personally enjoy and that I write, is that it has different elements of like horror and comedy and pathos all at once.
Hmm.
Um, and I like finding the unexpected in the expected. So I do a lot of like courses and writing workshops and events and stuff as well. And one of the ones I did recently was based around the music of Queen,
Oh.
because not only did they have some bangers, but they really knew how to write a story. They could pull you in from just two lyrics, like the first two
Hmm.
sentences. You would know like who the character was, where they were, what they were doing, what their motive was. It was just really good. But one of the prompts I was getting the participants to do in that workshop was think of a really ordinary character and then have them hold something really extraordinary, or vice versa. Um, so it was, for example, it was like 45-year-old Karen, who works in HR admin, is standing in the middle aisle of Lidl holding a lit stick of TNT. Um, if that's the first line of your story, I'm gonna want to read on. I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I know this character. This is a familiar kind of person. Oh, all right. they're holding something I did not expect. Sharp turn. And again, that's kind of into surrealism as well. So I like the unexpected. Um, but I think it has to be borne out with, you can't just kind of put surrealism in for the sake of it, or you can, I guess. You can do whatever you want. It's a free world.
Oh,
But
wow.
it's nice when it has a purpose or a point, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I never thought of Queen as storytellers before until you
Hmm.
mentioned, but you're
They
right.
are fantastic. I actually did an ABBA one right after as well, and ABBA also did some good stuff, but um Queen really knew how to provide setup and character in a way that I can now tell who has come to that workshop, because when I have them coming on my other courses, their first lines are really tight and I'm like, "Did you come to my?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah." I'm like, "Okay, I know because your first line is impeccable." And you drew me in, and like I know that I'm in your head now saying, "Remember, another one bites the dust." That's what you need to remember.
Oh wow. How much, speaking of music and lyrics, how much do lyrics influence your writing or vice versa?
I quite a lot actually. I have some stories that had you read them before this, you and I asked you to guess, which song I'd potentially based that on. I don't think you would have been able to guess. I had a story come out in Vestarian, which is not in this collection, um, and it is a really bleak story about two women at the end of the world, and the people around them have turned into I think zombies is probably the closest thing that you could say, though it's not quite that, but they have turned into happy zombies, and the only way to stay safe is to stay miserable and to stay as miserable and mean as possible. And these two women are kind of trying to forge a new relationship despite this, which just means that they're horrible to each other all the time. But it was based on the fact that someone once said it would be really difficult to write a song based on the lyrics for Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart. And I thought, no, no, I can do that. So that's what I came up with in the moment, is something, because, she's saying that, she doesn't know what to do. She's always in the dark.
Hmm.
Everything is terrible. Her world is falling apart. And I thought, yeah, I could do something with that. Something miserable, really lean into it.
Hmm, that's really interesting.
Hmm.
And so, speaking of zombies, another one of my favorite questions is about horror, and
Hmm.
it always surprises me uh, why horror appeals to people, because it's a genre that's it's made to make you uncomfortable, to scare you.
Hmm.
What about horror appeals to you?
So I'm a bit of a crybaby about jump scares. I don't like them. But I am an absolute sucker for psychological horror. Anything that gets under your skin and really burrows down is even better by me. Like I crave it. I just don't like being like kind of spooked. Um, but there's so much to horror, and I think when I had talked to my agent like post pandemic, and we were talking about which book I kind of wanted to write next, she said, it's interesting to see how the landscape of publishing and what editors are asking for has kind of changed, because some people came out of the pandemic saying, I've had a really hard couple of years and all I want is to read something cozy and familiar that isn't stressing me and that it feels nice, and I just don't want to be not challenged, but I don't want to be stressed while I'm reading, because life is already so stressful and I've been through so much. And the on the other hand, a lot of people were coming out and going, "Well, that was really terrible, and I want to feel alive again. So please, can I read the worst possible thing you can come up with?" So there were two very kind of different sets of things coming out of that. But a lot of the things that I find horrible, I don't think necessarily other people do, and a lot of the things that I write about, my friends and followers will say to me, "What's wrong with you?" And I say, "Oh, that really? Because that didn't bother me. The thing later bothered me, but this was just on the way there." And they're like, "No, that'll live inside my head rent free forever. I don't know why you did this." And yeah, that's horrible. Um, there's certainly things in a novel that I just finished where my agent said, let's ramp up the horror a little bit for this, go as wild as you want. And I don't like stuff to do with eyes. So at
Mm.
one point I just started the building itself is kind of crumbling, and I had little cracks appearing in the ceiling, which is what you would expect if a building is potentially crumbling. But when the character gets closer, she realizes that the cracks that are forming and then kind of healing in the ceiling kind of look like lidless eyes
Mm.
opening and closing. And she's obviously horrified by this and runs away. And to me, that was the worst thing I could possibly think of in that moment, was just eye stuff. I thought, oh God, to be watched, but not to even realize at first that you're being watched. Um, that really hits home for me. That's really deeply uncomfortable. But I think a lot of other things like body horror
Mm.
that I've written um, seem to disturb other people, but didn't bother me at all for some reason. So yeah.
It's really interesting the way we all have our the like those little things that kind of is too much for us. Have you ever written anything in a horror story or in a book that you thought, I've gone too far, I should scale back a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I wrote a novella at the start of the year, which I had written the short story of it for a call, but ended up being really quite long. And I thought, I actually could do with a second point of view, so I decided to write it as a novella. And um, I was always interested by the idea of like Pygmalion in like mythology. So it was he was a sculptor and he made a beautiful woman, and then he prayed to the gods, who then turned her into a real woman. Uh, like a bit of a Pinocchio vibe, but less weird if you
Mm.
like. And I thought that's really cool, but what if it was the other way around? So I have someone who is searching out vulnerable young women in order to perform surgeries on them to turn them into stone,
Mm.
to serve the gods in a particular way. And that didn't disturb me, but it was disturbing someone who I was letting read a little part of it at a time. Um, because the surgery and the body horror doesn't affect me in the same way that it affects other people. But um, there is a scene where one of the characters on her pursuit to get to a specific place, she arrives at the moon and she has no money and she is completely at the mercy of kind of everyone around her, which is quite frightening. And she is offered a job working in the mines, and she knows that people do that. So she's like, okay, that's fine. I can just work and make some money in order to continue the final stage of my journey. But because she has no one to vouch for her, they put her in the worst mine, and terrible things happen in the dark to everyone. And there was a point at which I wrote someone being torn apart by everyone else because he found a gem. That was, if you find a gem, you can almost kind of buy your way out of the mine and you get
Mm.
some money. So this young boy found a gem and he wasn't quiet enough about it, and he alerted the people around him, who then tore him apart. My character manages to get in and grab the gem without anyone noticing and get away. Um, but the way that as I was writing it, I was thinking the way that he deals with it is he tries to swallow it first. Because he just panics. He doesn't know what to do. These people are approaching him, so he swallows it. Then he realizes that was a terrible thing to do, and they will start tearing him apart. So she then is kind of delving around inside him to try to find that. And as I was writing that, I was thinking, I'm kind of putting myself off eating forever. Just kind of having a good old rake around in his esophagus. I thought, have I gone too far? Has man gone too far? Perhaps. This is uncomfortable. Um, but it was kind of necessary for the character. But I definitely did think, I'm not keen to write something like that again. It was a bit gross.
I always feel bad whenever I excuse me, whenever I taught, whenever I read a horror story and I talk to whoever created it, and I say that really, like, really would kind of ruined my day. It made me, I thought
Yeah.
about it all day, and it's a compliment, but it sounds like a terrible compliment. But what is that for you when someone
No,
comes and says, "You live rent free in my
absolutely.
head"? Yeah.
I love that personally. The novel that I just finished, I had one of my friends. I was letting her read all the way through. Every time I finished a chapter, and I it's a it's a book where I will permit you to fall in love with these people, and then I'm just planning to ruin you emotionally about halfway through. And there was a chapter where I received a message from her saying, I hate you and I hate this book and I'm not talking to you and I don't want to read anymore because I don't know how you can do this to me and I'm deeply upset. And I knew exactly where she was and I had to promise her that it would be okay at the end and I would fix, you know, that she had to trust me and it would turn out well. Which took quite a lot of doing because I it looks very much like I've written myself into a specific corner, which was required for something later in the plot. So as you're reading it, it does definitely look like this is real and this is terrible. I do kind of fix it later, but that to me told me that it was working. Um, and also in the novel that I have coming out next year, the first people to read that were my parents, actually, who are have got better about reading in recent years and quite enjoy some of the stuff that I don't send them all the horror, obviously. I don't want them to be like, did we raise you okay? Are you all right? But the novel that's coming out next year, there is a particular chapter in that where my mother called me one night and she said, "Oh, I've read your recent chapter," and I said, "Okay, did you like it?" And she said, "Uh-huh." And I thought, what's coming here? And she was like, "Yeah, I mean, it kind of." So I was lying awake last night thinking about it. It made me feel really upset, like about this specific thing. Like, can you change it? And I said, "Oh no, that means it's working." And I kept it in. And she was like, "I feel really upset about this character. Please, can you make it better for them?" And I said, "No, I can't. I'm sorry. It has to. It's working. It has to stay that way because if I don't make you hate me a little bit, I don't think I'm doing my job right. I
Mm.
want you to be like, how dare you make me care about these people, and then do something mean to them. That shows me that you've created that bond with the character,
Mm.
um, which is working, and also it's relevant. Again, I just hide behind it's relevant for the plot, but I do like being cruel. I'm sorry.
With 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 adding those things in a story, do you feel like you need a happy ending, or are you okay with a not so happy ending?
I'm okay with not a happy ending, very much so. There's definitely um, I don't mind either. I often tend towards a bittersweet ending.
Mm.
So one of the stories in Turduken, which was out in Pseudopod this year, it's called Them at Number 74. And it's about a pair of retirees who decide that their marriage needs a bit of a spark again. And they decide that the best way to do that is to start murdering people together, which it seems from their point of view like quite a logical step. And they are kind of just like everybody's parents where I grew up. They're these kind of like nice people, quite practical. If they're gonna do something, then they're gonna be exactly like this about it. Like they're standing over the body at one point of someone they've just murdered, and one of them says, "Oh, she uses plastic bags," and the other says, "Oh, that's good. It's good for the environment. It's good that she does that. It would be terrible if she didn't. Things are bad enough already." And it's just the banality of it really amuses me. Um, so yeah. Uh, I've completely forgotten your question. I'm sorry. I got really excited about talking about
No, it's
that. So,
okay.
sorry, remind me what your question was.
Oh no, about happy endings.
Oh, about happy endings. Yeah. So, originally for that story, I had an ending, and everyone who had read it prior to me submitting it hated the ending.
Mm.
Um, and I think it was probably too ambiguous. And I ended up having to change it, and then it was accepted by Pseudopod. So that ending is you could read it as happy or unhappy. So I will spoiler it for because it's been out for a few months, but it's also in the collection. Um, the One of them is kind of developing some dementia, and the other is concerned that this will mean that their secret comes out at some point. And so the kindest thing she can do is to, basically murder her husband in the gentlest possible way. And the last line of the story is because she does it, and the last line is because Mrs. Patterson loves Mr. Patterson. So it's she does it out of love. She does it to protect him. She does it to protect herself. And she would rather that it was her than anyone else, which is
Mm.
another kind of love. And to me, that was it's a really bittersweet ending. It's obviously not happy because one of them is still murdering the other. It's hard to kind of argue that it is happy, but there is a certain amount of closure in it that I think is bittersweet. Of course, some of them are happy endings. I have written happy endings, but um, I think because people know me as well, like the ending of the Turducken story, um, I had a completely different idea by what I meant by the ending, although I left it a little vague, but I knew what I thought. And everyone kept saying to me, why are they going to commit suicide? And I was like, what? Is that the reading you're getting from this? Like, oh, I suppose you could. I did leave it a little vague, but to me, that I actually had a more optimistic take on the very end of that story. I just wanted you to be able to imagine for yourself their own future that was about to happen, and you over the course of the short story, you kind of become quite attached to these weird little birds. And I thought people would naturally gravitate to, oh, they're free and everything's fine, and instead people were like, oh, they're gonna die, and I thought, oh, is this me? Or is this like, is this the world we live in now, where we're very cynical and we kind of expect everything to end in this way? But for the record, I believe that Turducken lives, and even now it's out floating somewhere. In what was it I said? I think I said, no, no, no. In my head, it goes to an island in Jamaica and has a really good time. And just like is on permanent vacation. Nothing's wrong. It doesn't die. It has a good time. Let's just not ask questions about
Yeah.
it.
With all the different work you do, how did you start writing? How did you what sparked that passion for you?
I think I've always been doing it. I apparently could pretty much almost read before I could talk. I refused to bathe unless I was permitted to bring my waterproof book in with me to the bath,
Oh, wow.
where other kids would be asking for bedtime stories and falling asleep during them. Apparently, I was bolt upright, sitting wide eyed, and was like, "Oh, you've missed a bit" if they skipped pages. So my parents had to read stories from start to finish, and they just kind of encouraged that. There were always books around. At that point, they were not necessarily big readers themselves, but um, yeah, there was some, I think, some skill or talent there that they kind of encouraged. Um, and I kind of stopped um, thinking about it when I got to be kind of a teen and young adult because um, it seemed like such a lofty dream. I was like, oh, to be a writer, like what do you do? How do you do that? And I had gone to university to do psychology. I realized after a year of it, I didn't want to do that. It didn't seem like it was for me, and I dropped out. And I kind of just worked for a few years. Then I decided to go back to university. Um, and get my degree in case I wanted to go and live somewhere else and maybe teach English or something. And along the way, I had planned to kind of just do an English literature degree. The Open University offered creative writing courses, and I thought, yeah, I could do that. And it turned out I was pretty good at it. And they were like, okay, distinctions. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is a thing maybe I should do. And I was never under any um, misguided notions that I was ever going to make a lot of money from writing because it's not, you have to kind of do it for the love. It would be nice if we could get paid for it, but unfortunately, things are the way it is. Um, but it's always kind of been there. But I think I also needed to get some life experience under my belt as well before I could kind of start writing with any knowledge or proper empathy about you know it's sort of, I think everyone kind of writes the same in their early 20s. I don't like to generalize too much, but I see a lot of the same kind of thing. And then I did my master's right after that, and then after my master's I thought, okay, I have a reasonable amount of academic success here, but I'm still nowhere near where I want to be. So that was in late 2019. I graduated. And then I took the next year or so. I finished my novel that I'd been writing, which is the novel that's coming out next year. Um, and then I had been invited to join a group. And I also, during the pandemic, like wrote a hell of a lot. To date, over the last 2 years, I've written, oof, it's probably between 900,000 and 1 million words over the last 2 years.
Wow.
It's been a lot. So I'm happy to say I've improved because if I hadn't after that, I'd be kind of worried. But um, I just knew that that I was good, but I wasn't where I wanted to be. I knew I could be better. So there were different things I did. Quantity was, I always say that to my mentees and to people I coach and tutor as well as, you know, you have to be prepared to sit down and actually write. And also, the more afraid of failure you are, the less likely you are to ever actually do anything. So there is some absolute nonsense in my files where I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking here. Like, it never went anywhere, but I write down everything that I think of. Last night, I remembered something else that was completely random and got up and wrote it down because I thought, well, that might come in useful somewhere. Um,
Mm.
in the light of day, not all of those things seem sensible. But I think it's important to, to have them because you never know when you can use them later. And I also looked at, I hadn't really uh, done any flash fiction really by that point as well. So I had joined a group that was headed by Sage Turtle, who kind of headhunted me from seeing me perform somewhere. And I was in that group with Sage and Sarah Hills, who has released a novella in Flash and is a fantastic Flash fiction writer. I had been to the Writers Hotel at that point. So I had been tutored by Elizabeth Hand, and then
Mm.
the year after by Jeffrey Ford, who blurbed Turduken for me. Very nice. Jeff is a great guy, very to the point, which I like about him. And I'd made some great friends at the Writers Hotel. We're still in touch. And basically, I just looked at what everybody I knew was doing, identified their strong points, identified my weak points, and then I started going, okay, I have friend X. They're fabulous at this. They're in all these places. I'm going to go and study what they did and see if I
Mm.
can emulate that in my own voice. Um, I have a horrible habit of writing something without any description in it because I can see it in my head. So I forget that other people can't. So I will just write a story and then afterwards, my agent will say, yeah, what does anyone look like? What color are the thing? And I'm like, go back into the walls or whatever color. And I have to now. I'm doing that automatically because I worked in it for like a year and a half. But I know
Mm.
my own weaknesses, and so now I've hopefully beaten some of those habits out of myself, and I'm able to produce work that is like smoother,
Mm.
um, which requires less editing, which also helps overall for like the speed of the thing as well. The novel that I had just finished, um, I actually wrote the first chapter. It was only supposed to be a short story back in May. And my darling partner, who's also a writer, had read it, and another friend had read it, and they both nagged me for 2 weeks, and because they were like, "Oh, it's so good, we want to read something," and I was like, "No, it's just a short story." And besides, I told my agent that I was going to write a different book, so you're going to need to leave me alone, and they didn't. And I was like, if I write just like one more story, just a sequel, like, will you leave me alone? And they said, yeah, 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 we will, we will. Of course they didn't. So I wrote a sequel, and then I thought, I hate that you're right, but actually this would be kind of a fun book. And so I kept writing it, and I kept insisting that it would just be a novelette. And then by the time I got over that threshold, I was like, no, no, it's just going to be a novella. It'll be done by 40,000 words. And then it was 78,000 words and it
Wow.
was done. And I thought, why do I do this to myself? I never actually meant to write it. It was purely an accident. I was just trying to finish it while I had something else in mind. Um, but it's a great because it was an example of which is kind of like Turducken as well, of what happens when I'm allowed to just do whatever I want in a dark corner. And it turns out pretty well actually. So I'll just do that from now on. But I think it was really important for me to like try and take ego out of it, or at least some ego. I think subverting the ego maybe rather than kind of saying, oh, I have no faults, my work is perfect the way it is. But my ego is the other way, which is I'm really ambitious. I always want to be better. I always want to be the best. So I'm constantly looking at other people and saying, oh, what did they do? And how did they do that? And hey, I like this phrase. And like, wow, did you see the way that she describes this thing. Like I love
Mm.
that, how, break it down brick by brick and kind of put it back together for myself. Um, so it's been crazy to see how much the work has improved
Hmm.
over that period of time. So I'm really excited because it's now at a point where I feel really confident about it, but also um I'll never be satisfied. Like I'll always want to keep getting better because there's always new writers out there. I stumble across new people every week where I'm like, "Oh wow, did you see this? Like I never thought of doing that before." Um and that was something that was really important to me as well, because the novel that I just finished is the short story of that, the first chapter is actually going to come out in Apex in the next, I don't know when. They, they accept it. I assume it's the next 6 months. I guess they'll tell me, but um it was written uh entirely in moves from a real and very famous chess game.
Hmm.
Um that was kind of interesting. And then I thought, because I'd been thinking about Carmen Maria Machado, and things that she did in Her Body and Other Parties. Um, and when I read that for the first time, it blew my mind.
Hmm.
Because there are things that she does there with form and structure. Sometimes she just breaks the fourth wall. She addresses the reader directly. And I thought, wait, can I do that? Are you allowed to do that? Wow, okay. I've been thinking like so small, but actually the box is bigger, and maybe you can even break out of the box. So it's something that I did a little bit with, and Turduken. One of the thruple chapters is structured in titles from Friends episodes, but the non-human character in that episode can only speak in catchphrases from Frasier, which got really fun. And then this novel that I just finished, obviously the first story, as I said, was chess moves. But then I thought, well, I kind of like to keep that conceit going for the whole novel. So I better come up with something different every chapter. So there's like a chapter that's a recipe. It's actually a real recipe. You can
Hmm.
you can make it, and the character is making the recipe as things are going on around him. There was one where, and I was kind of writing this at the same time as one of the stories in Turducken, which was recently released by Bear Creek, which is called On the Wing, which is my love of collective nouns for animals. Because there are so many and they're so interesting. So I had written one that was all bird collective nouns. Um, and in this novel, I had decided that, because within that, there's still sometimes there are multiple collective nouns
Hmm.
for one specific bird. And for this particular chapter in the novel, I had found out that you can have three different collective nouns for sparrows, um, and you can have a quarrel of sparrows or a ubiquity of sparrows, or I forget the other one now. There's something else of sparrows. And I thought that's really interesting because not once have I ever thought of sparrows and thought I need more words to describe them. They're just sparrows, but actually, I wonder why and I wonder what the history is. So
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of my writing comes from stumbling across something on the internet and going, "Oh, that's cool. Okay, what can I do with that?"
Catchphrases from Frasier. That's great.
Yeah. At one point, someone just says "Dear God, Niles," but in a very sultry tone.
And we did have a question from Spectre.
Hmm.
He was asking, what books inspired you to start writing?
Ooh, I mean, to start writing, geez, I mean that would be going way back to my childhood. But recently, I can tell you that, as I said, Her Body and Other Parties. I recently read "Leave the World Behind" by Rumen Alam at the start of this year. In chapter, I think, 3 of that book, he lists everything that this person is buying for their family who are on vacation. That is everything that's in that chapter. It is just, she bought this, she bought that. But I have never been so gripped by a grocery list. And I thought, you magician, you sorcerer, I don't know how you're doing this, but it's incredible the way you describe the food, the way you describe the produce, the reasons that you give for her buying this thing. It is magical.
Hmm.
Um, as you can see, I'm in my library right now, so I'm gonna look around. I was always a fan of like Harlan Ellison as well. Again, I like surrealist kind of sci-fi. Angela Carter for like fairy tales and body horror. Um, I'm actually a huge fan of Jodie Taylor.
Hmm.
I'm a massive Jodie Taylor stan. I don't actually know anyone who else is, which makes me very sad because Jodie Taylor's amazing. She has a series called The Chronicles of St. Mary's,
Hmm.
which are about uh, historians going back in time to document contemporary events and frequently messing it up and getting caught up in things that they shouldn't be. And it's very funny, very entertaining.
Hmm.
But also, I love time travel done well.
Yeah.
That's something that it's rarely done well, but it's something that I really like. Um, as you can see, there's definitely a lot of things behind me. There's also, I mean, I like The Witcher as well. Like I remember reading the collection before it was cool years and
Yeah.
years ago. And again, I like some horror as well. And although I would read anything, like I recently read Night Bitch and Milkman. Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder and Milkman by Anna Burns. And I really like the fact that um they both deal with completely different things, but none of their characters have like proper names. It's like the mother, the milkman, the son, the husband, the brother-in-law. Um, but you still know who everyone is and you still can get emotionally attached to them.
Hmm.
And I'm starting a PhD in January, and one of the things that I want to focus on in my thesis is Jose Saramago's blindness, because again, that's something that he does, and I do my own writing as well. I frequently take away names and just have like titles or some kind of ascribed title to someone. And in blindness, again, it's like the thief, the doctor's wife, um, and to me, that's really interesting because I'm always wondering like how much can you strip back from prose and still have it be interesting? How much can you take away um, and still let your reader connect with what
Hmm.
you're saying? Because blindness goes really pretty far. Like he doesn't even have dialogue tags. It's just in right in there and mixed in the prose,
Hmm.
which is sometimes you have to get into it a little bit. Um, but Saramago was a genius. So
Hmm. Let's check that out. Our friend Em's Book Nook is here. Hey, Emily. Hope you're doing good today. And you mentioned comedy too. How difficult is it to write comedy? Because I think comedy is a lot about timing when
yeah,
when in live action. So how do you get that timing with when you write? How does that work?
I think I like amusing myself. So there's definitely some things that I find really funny. I have quite a dark sense of humor. Um, but a pithy one-liner could always work. I'm not really a fan of like snark. People will often be like, "Oh, these characters are so snarky," and I just think, "Oh no, like that. I don't want to read that. That's not really my thing." Um, Wittiness is different, I think.
Mm.
So I read Bunny by Mona Wad, which is about a young woman in an MFA program. If you've ever been in an MFA program, it's very accurate. And she finds herself on the outside of a clique. Um, and she feels very much an outsider. And they at some point they sort of try to bring her in, but even as they do so, they are incredibly condescending and terrible. And the whole thing is just very funny. So for me, I'm always looking for those moments that would crack me up.
Mm.
Um, so for example, in the novel that's coming out next year, Beast, which is about um, it was my attempt to fix what I saw as the problems inherent in Disney's Beauty and the Beast, which was why is everyone in this village French and like, but you're not in France. Like, I don't understand what you're doing here. So I thought, well, what if it was in France, and what if you're going to put it in France? Why isn't it at the time of the French Revolution, and how would that influence the effects of the rebellion on the castle and the inhabitants? Um, and there is a part, the it's from the butler's point of view, um, And he really does not understand anything that's going on. He's a guy who just wants to do his job. He lives by routine. He is not good in social situations. He is really deeply uncomfortable with people. And he just kind of wants to like serve the family like his father did, and just that's what he wants to do. That's his whole life. He's quite happy. And of course, the revolution frequently encroaches on the castle and becomes very problematic. And there's also a witch who casts a curse on the castle, which is, you know, from the Disney version, and obviously the original fairy tale. And I kind of wanted to make a point because I always thought it was pretty unfair that the young beast, Prince Adam, was the one who answered the door and was a brat to the witch, and she was like, "Well, I'm just going to curse everyone in this castle." I thought, are you really any better than him? Like, you clearly don't see these people as people. You're just like, "Oh, screw you, servant. You happen to be there at the time." I thought, actually, you're not coming off well in the story at all. Um, and I wonder what would happen if that kind of happens. So there is a particular bit in the book where the butler is aware that the curse has been cast, but they don't quite know what the effects are yet. They're a little slow to take, um, and certain things have already happened, so they're already down several servants at this point. And as you can imagine, the chores are not being done quite as well as he would like, and he accidentally happens upon the youngest footman, who has been trying to hang himself in his room. However, one of the effects of the curse is that it's effectively stopped time and stopped them being able to harm themselves inside the castle.
Hmm.
So the young footman has tried to hang himself, but all that's happened is that he's just been there for a while and he can't get down. So he's just sort of like, "Hello," and the butler's like, "What are you doing? We actually don't have time for this. Whatever you're doing, just stop it." And he's like, "Well, I can't." And the butler's like, "Well, the breakfast shift, and I'll come back for you. And you just need to, you did this to yourself. I can't believe you're so selfish. We don't have time for this." And it's just very, very dark. And he's just like, "I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Just whenever you have time, cut me down." And it's just very, very dark back and forth. And he spends the whole breakfast shift just being really mad that he's like, "I can't believe you would choose this moment. Like, it's very inconvenient for me. I feel personally affronted that you did this." Um, and for me, like this inability to see uh like a situation as a whole and to have quite a tunnel vision, that's something that I like to rely on quite a lot for comedic value. Um, and uh, I also kind of like, misdirection, or people like not being quite who they should be. As well, I have a story that I have not finished, but I'd really like to one day, which is a scientist who would like to assemble an excellent crack team of female assassins. So she has resurrected Medusa, Charlotte Corday, who was the murderer of Jean Paul Marat in the French Revolution, and Judith, as in Judith and Holofernes from the Bible. Only the intern has mixed something up, and she gets Judith, Charlotte Corday, and Judith from HR. And she's like, "Oh, this is not the crack team that I wanted, but like, how bad can it be?" And actually, Judith from HR is just a complete liability, and not good at anything, and keeps trying to protect the company. And to me, this is really funny because I worked in a corporate environment for almost 15 years. Um, so to me, I'm like, "Oh, this rings so true." Where she's like, "Well, actually, I'm here to protect the company, not you. I'm sorry." And she's just like, "Can you just pay attention to your assassin mission, please?" Um, the fact that you're giggling tells me that it is
Yeah,
working. I should definitely go back to that story.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. That's
Hmm.
great.
Hmm.
And yeah, you you also mentioned The Witcher, and I was curious. Have you watched the adaptation on Netflix?
I've seen like a few of the episodes. I saw maybe half of the first season. I've been really busy, so I'm really behind in a lot of my shows. Um, I couldn't get into it to begin with because it was really annoying me that they changed some things from the books. Um, but then I did start getting into it more, and I was kind of like, "Oh, you're doing things. You're just doing them in a different order than the very first collection. That's fine." Although I don't know if I like the fact that they changed Dandelion. I kind of liked him from the books. I liked that he was this older scamp who was just, he'd been around a little bit and he was kind of wise to the world, but also a bit useless. And they've replaced him with like some young boy bander. I was like, come on, who's this? Give me my middle-aged dandelion.
Yeah.
Um, smarming his way through the courts. But it's good. My partner watches it a lot. She's deeply upset that Henry Cavill is leaving. And to be fair, he made an excellent Geralt.
Mhm.
So I don't know who they're replacing him with.
Liam Hemsworth.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
because we actually had an argument about this because we come down on different sides of the Hemsworth hill.
Oh.
I maintain that Liam is the better Hemsworth, which is of course the correct opinion.
Wow.
Um,
That's a hot
and
take.
apparently, yeah, that's a hot and wrong take from this, but sorry, it's just the way I feel. I fight for the underdog.
Yeah. Yeah. He's done pretty well for himself, though.
Yeah, I mean, like he's been in some things, at least one thing that I can think of.
He
Poor
was in
guy.
Hunger Games, and he was
Yeah,
in something else. I forget what it was.
exactly. I can't remember what else he's been in, but I'm like, see, that's exactly what I mean. So we all should cheer for Liam. He's done too well. He's fine. He doesn't need anyone's support. He's good.
Yeah,
He's
he's
achieved.
Thor. Yeah, he's fine.
Exactly. He's fine. He's fine forever. But Liam, I'm like, oh, good for him. Good for him
And you mentioned our friend Joseph had a
then.
question or a comment. I
Hmm.
think Dandelion and Geralt were the best two casted characters. I had a bad
Hmm.
feeling it's going to tank after the third season. After Cavill leaves.
Well, maybe now I'm wondering if I should even go back to it, but I probably should. Uh, I I plan to use the next month or so now that I've finished some big projects to catch up on my TV watching. But it's so difficult now when
Yeah.
if you have limited time and you kind of want to feel like you want to make the most out of it, it's hard to know what to watch.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's tough. And it's been out for a little while, but and you mentioned time travel stories. Have you
Mhm.
seen Dark on Netflix?
I love Dark. I was
Okay, yeah.
obsessed with Dark. Yes, I really enjoyed it. It was actually so the I had a novelette published by Assemble Media in July, which is being pitched as things, which I can't talk about, and it has a dark element to it because it is about someone who is being guided by her older and parallel selves um, through her life. And my partner and I had binged all of Dark. I'm really, really excited about their new show because I really like this kind of thing. I also really enjoyed The Seven Lives of Leah,
Hmm.
which was adapted from a book, which is about a girl who kind of her life isn't really going anywhere and she's not doing particularly well for herself. And she discovers a body, and the next morning she wakes up and she is back in the past in that guy's body, the guy who everyone thinks is the skeleton, and she knows from when she found it and the police announcement afterwards that this guy was murdered. And so she decides that now she's in his body, she's going to find out who murdered him. But every time that she goes to sleep, she ends up back in her own body. And then every time she goes to sleep again, thinking that she'll be back in his, she's actually back in someone else's body in that same time period. So she gets to kind of go around his friends and family and stuff and work out what's happening. And I really
Hmm.
liked that. I thought it was a really fresh take on something.
Hmm. And I'd been trying to convince Joseph to watch Dark. He finally started watching it. He's on the last episode.
Mhm. Oh, it's so good.
So good. So
And
good.
actually, like, I will not spoiler specifically any things, but I really like the way that they laid the groundwork in the first season for things that you don't realize until two or three, when you kind of go, wait, oh, you already mentioned that so early on, but now it's come full circle. There were certain things that I thought, oh, I love that because I didn't see that coming, and I
Yeah.
really like that.
Yeah, I love how they just kind of go for it, and it's just
Yeah.
really bonkers. They
Hmm.
just really don't, so
Hmm.
really ambitious.
It was part of the reason behind why I wanted a yellow raincoat. I was like, I gotta have that dark aesthetic.
Nice.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, Joseph, it's one of those shows that keeps teasing you.
It does, yeah, and I really like that. It's the kind of TV that I would want to write is something like that. Like it's smart. It's a little bit complicated, but not so complicated that you can't follow it. But it's really satisfying to watch pay off as well.
I think it really helps too that it's 3 seasons, so it doesn't tease you for too long.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Although, I would have loved for it to go on because I really, really enjoyed it. Um, and they had some the soundtrack was pretty good as well. It had some really atmospheric music, some nice songs. The theme tune became kind of a thing that lived in my head for a while.
yeah. I forget the name of the band. Um, Baccarat, or I forget the name, but yeah,
Mm.
it's and the intro too. The way the intro changes through the seasons
Yeah.
is really neat. The little details that change. So in with all the other things you do, I also
Mhm.
read on your website that you are a member of the of your community archery club.
Yeah, yes. Or at least I haven't been for a while because there was COVID and then I was kind of too busy. I have my own bow. I can hit a target. Not necessarily well, but I can hit one. I'd like to get back into doing it because I feel like when you write a lot, you become quite sedentary.
Mm.
And it's not necessarily good for your physical or mental health to just sit in a chair all day every day and stare at a screen. So definitely something I'd like to get back into. Now that I'm about to start my PhD, I don't know why I keep saying when I start my PhD, I'm going to have loads of time because I obviously want to have. And I'm like, oh, it's going to be great. I'll have so much time to do all these things that I have been putting off for years.
And Joseph commented,
Mhm.
"From is a great time travel horror portal show."
Oh, I haven't heard of that one. Okay.
Me either.
I'll
You
have
should
to
look
make a
that
note
up.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Coherence is also it was like 2015, I think. It stars Nicholas Brendan from Buffy. It's very low budget. It is one of the best films I've ever seen. I watch it once a year at least. I first saw it at the Edinburgh Film Festival actually, and the whole audience was just enthralled. It is a fantastic. It's kind of like sometimes people say, oh, have you seen Primer? And I'm like, yeah, Primer's okay. Have you seen Coherence? Coherence is feels way more accessible and is not time travel, but is parallel universes.
That's the
Um,
one with the comet, right?
yes,
The dinner
yeah, the
party.
combat. Yeah, I
Yeah.
really, really like. I love the chaotic feel of it, and they were given quite a lot of uh rein to kind of it wasn't all scripted, they were kind of given their head to do whatever they wanted. um there are just some really gasp out loud moments in there that I'm always like, oh, that's the film I wish I'd written, is Coherence.
Have you seen? It's with Ethan Hawke. It's kind of similar. Predestination.
No, I haven't. I'm so behind. I'm so behind.
I
I still
believe
haven't
that's
seen
it.
Euphoria, so I'm like so behind, it's unreal. I hear that's good though.
Yeah, Predestination is one of those kind of off the wall movies. It's been around for a little bit, so but yeah, it's one of those that
Mhm.
if you get a chance to check it out.
Yeah, that sounds good. Again, I'll have so much time next year, just so much.
Yeah, yeah.
In between my thesis and the book that I'm writing for my PhD, I'll have loads of time. It'll be fine.
Let me just get rid of this random spam comment really quick. Sorry. And with horror writers, especially, I'm always curious if any real life experiences, like any creepy experiences, have influenced your stories.
Mm, I don't think so. Um, no, I don't. I don't think anything particularly creepy has happened to me.
Hmm.
Although I do have a creepy Christmas story, um, that I keep wanting to write, but then I keep putting myself off because it's actually quite scary. I've created something that I think is too scary to write, maybe. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it's just decorations in a yard that keep moving. Um, they're supposed to look like little children, like peeking over a fence, and actually they decrease in number um, every time you kind of look at them. And every time I
Hmm.
think about it, I think, oh no, I can't remember. I've actually come up with something. Maybe I should just give it to someone else to write because I'm like, no, that's actually, oh, that's too scary for me. But no, not a lot of creepy things happen. If when things go crash in the night here, I just think, oh, it's the cat breaking something else. If I was robbed, I wouldn't even realize. I just assume it was my very muscular cat breaking something new.
Yeah, we have dogs, and whenever something kind of there's a noise with it, that's just the dogs. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, an easy
Mm.
way to kind of brush it off.
Yep.
With all the things you do, how do you balance your time between editing and writing? And how do you have a certain schedule that you keep?
No, it's completely chaotic. I mean, I had a day job and will up until the start of December. That I've been there for a really long time, and basically it's just get up in the morning, do the job. If I have breaks, work, and then when my day job finishes, I was just continuing to work. Um, I was usually pulling like since about March, I was pulling consistently like 12 to 15-hour days over like 6 months and including the weekends. It was getting pretty bad because I just had so many things that I wanted to do this year and it was the only way of fitting them all in. Um, and I also have a tendency to just want to say yes to something new and exciting as well. If I think this will be good for my career, or, I'm also pretty good at writing quickly and to deadlines. So there was definitely a lot of plate juggling and balancing at some points to try and get everything done. But also occasionally there would be some submission deadline that would crop up, and I'd think, I really don't have time. Well, what's another hour? Like I might as well. I don't plan on doing that because it's not sustainable. But I I really just work like a lot, and I'm really lucky in that we don't have children yet, and our cats are, apart from the crashing, relatively easy to care for. And my partner is also a writer, and so she understands, um, the pressures of wanting to do this because often, especially at like this kind of point in your career, when if you don't have like a traditional book deal or anything yet, the only person who is really maintaining your schedule is you. Um, so if you're not going to do it, or if you're going to do it a little slower, that's fine. Like it's on your schedule, but that might not always be the case. So I think most people would probably take that as an excuse to just go a little easier, but because there's nobody telling me to stop, I just go harder all the time. It's a really bad habit, but it has worked out pretty well for me because I now have a nicely bulging CV and various things to my name. But yeah, I've definitely kind of come to the conclusion that it's not a sustainable thing, and occasionally I will take the weekend off now and not write at all and go do something. Um, Other than I would just complain about the fact that I haven't written anything in like a week. Um, but I think I expect quite a lot from myself, and not in a terrible way. Like I'm not gonna sit around and cry if I don't do it, but I know what I'm capable of, so I
Mm.
push myself because, well, why wouldn't I? It's nice to have. At the moment, I've kind of sold most of the stuff I've written, which is really nice, but it's also a pain because now I have to write new stuff to start subbing it out. My submission queue is like so small, um, so I need to find time to do that, and also find time to treat my very darling fiance who puts up with me, and to actually see my friends, because every now and again one of them will say, "Are you all right? Like I haven't seen you other than like a square of you for a really long time," and then we'll have to go and get coffee. But it is important to balance like mental health, and also I like to read, as you can see as well. So I got to make time for that as well. Um, and I always feel a bit depleted if I've gone for like a month or two without having a book on the go.
Yeah. And Joseph had a question. Do you have a daily word count you try to hit?
Nope, not even close. Because I always feel like it's just a recipe for disaster, like, because what if you don't hit it? Are you going to feel bad that you didn't hit it? And often what I see, especially in my clients, and sometimes in my mentees as well, is They'll say, "Oh, I want to write, 1,000 words a day for whatever," and I say, like, but do you really need to? And if you don't hit that 1,000 words, are you going to feel bad? Because if you are, lower it.
Hmm.
What is the least you can write in a day and still be satisfied? Like, what is, and I say, can you write 200 words every day? And they look at me like I'm crazy and they say, well, of course. And I'm like, yes, of course. Do you know what feels really good when you hit a target? Dopamine. Why not lower your target and then hit it? Because then you're going to think, like, oh, you're going to start feeling great about yourself. Stop hitting these really like high targets, and then there's more chance that you're not going to succeed. You're going to become dispirited over time. You're going to start looking back and thinking, well, I hit it, but only twice this week maybe, and there were 5 times I didn't, and look at that percentage. And as humans, we're kind of hardwired to like look at the negatives, not the positives. And I don't think that helps. So I'm like, if you wrote anything, good for you. If you want to set your limit, make it really low, because then you're always going to hit it. You're always going to feel good. It doesn't matter if you then continue writing. Like, great. If you felt like writing an extra 500 or 700 words after that, fantastic. But you've already hit it. Unless you're the kind of person that you're like, oh, I'm worried that I'll only write 200 words in a day. And even if you did, so what? That's a steady pace. I think we're writers can be so hard on themselves. Um, and I didn't really realize how much so until I started coaching, like professionally as well. And I was like, damn, everyone's so hard on themselves. Like, it's really easy for me to be a cheerleader because I feel like I'm the only one saying, oh my God, relax. Like, you're fine if you're doing it and you're doing it at your pace. Like, do you go to marathons and like yell at people who are in the middle of the pack or at the end? No, that's really weird and mean. You just like let them do it. They're still doing it. They're just doing it at their own pace, like. And also other people like have kids, they have taxing jobs, they have like family stuff going on, they might have mental health or physical health issues.
Hmm.
And I'm like, you know just there. I have some chronic pain issues as well. I have like a back problem, and there are days when I can't get comfortable no matter what I do, no matter how many painkillers I take. And it doesn't matter whether I'm sitting or standing or walking or whatever. I wake up in pain, and I'm in pain all day. And that doesn't stop me from writing, but sometimes it puts me off. But I'm not going to feel bad.
Hmm.
It is what it is. This meat prison doesn't always work that well. It's not my fault. Like, I didn't make it that way, but it just doesn't work. Um, and there's no reason why I should feel bad about it, because that's kind of taking away from all the good stuff I did.
Meat prison. I like that.
Yeah. Apparently, I'm not supposed to call it that because my fiance thinks this is a gross. She's also a doctor, so that makes sense. But she's like, that's a gross word to use.
Spectre commented, "I'm lucky if I write
Mhm.
60 a day. I only write for about an hour."
Okay, but like, look at the way you phrase that. You're lucky if you only write that. Like, well, why not say like, yeah, I write at least 60 words every day. Like, that's awesome. You're awesome. You're still writing. You're writing more than people who didn't write anything.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Yep.
pretty good? And you're still like getting towards your goal. You're still making incremental progress. All progress is progress.
Hmm.
Don't be hard on yourself, because the industry will be hard on you. It'll be hard enough on you. That's why whenever I have a chance, I try and kind of give back to the community and do queries and free things. And because I'm like, look, we just need to be there for each other, and build each other up and say, hey, it doesn't matter if you think you're only doing something, but like, good for you, because publishing is not going to tell you that. Publishing is going to be sucky to you and tell you all these things. But actually, whatever you're doing is fine. I was reading a book called 4,000 Weeks, um, which is all about like this really toxic culture of productivity,
Hmm.
which I really like, because we feel like we have to be productive. And then if we achieve some level of productiveness, we feel like we should be even more productive. But actually, the point of our lives is not to be productive, it is to do what we want, what we value, what we prioritize, what is important to us. And that's okay. So, like, if you have other commitments that you value, if you have like a kid, you want to spend time with your kid. If you have a show that you want to like, so that you want to watch, so you can talk about it with your friends later, like, those are things you value and prioritize, and they are not less important. They're, if you value them, then they're important to you as well. And you don't have to be churning out thousands of words every day. You don't have to be a Stephen King or an Alexander McCall Smith, who I actually like very much and have met. Um, but you don't have to do that, and you don't have to compare yourself to other people because you're you. It's okay to be you. It's fine.
Mm. And you mentioned being a mentor. What have you learned
Mhm.
about yourself during the time that you've been teaching?
I mean, there are things that my mentees all do. They're all very, very good in their own ways, and some of those things overlap. And some of them do like slightly different genres. Um, it's been interesting because they all need maybe a different thing. Some people want more cheerleading. Some people don't need as much cheerleading, but they need more structure. Some need deadlines, some get really antsy about deadlines. So it's kind of like finding out what each individual needs and then saying, like, okay, part of it is the small picture right now. What are you doing right now? How can I help? And part of it is the big picture. Do you know where you want to go in your career in like a year, 2 years, 5 years? Where do you want to be? What do you want to have achieved? What can I do to help you with that? So for example, one of my mentees, um, before this year, she had only written novels and she hadn't written any short fiction. She was actually convinced that she could write short fiction. And I was like, this is nonsense because you're a very good writer. You absolutely can. And I badgered her into a little bit. Um, and then so in January, she started writing and now she has like 5 acceptances of short stories, and people are commenting on her stuff saying like, oh, this is really good, and she's like, yeah, I didn't know I could do it. I'm like, of course you could do it. You could do it all along, but like, I don't know why you never tried this. Don't be afraid to try something new. Like, yeah, you can. So I also have kind of just very gently nagged them about things as well that I see that they're good at, but they don't necessarily see it or quite believe. um and hopefully that I can be helpful in that way as well. And also because I am a bit further on in my career, I can say, well, when I was here, like this is what I did, and this is, how I identified things I wanted to work on. These are like, the courses that I would look at, or like different workshops, and figure out like, do you find it hard to come up with ideas? Go to a prompt workshop. Do you find it hard to finish things? Go to a workshop that's like that. Um, so yeah, that's been really interesting, and just overall general cheerleading and kind of writer advice as well, of like, here's how you query, here's how you write a good query letter, here's things to watch out for in agents and agencies that you might not know. And also, if you get an agent, it is not all sunshine and rainbow and puppies, even though you may love them and they may love you, but the landscape of publishing has changed.
Mm.
And you may go on submission to editors multiple times before you sell a book, in the traditional way. Editors are ghosting agents now,
Ooh.
which is pretty crappy for them. But it's not something that I knew before, and it's not
Mm.
something that anybody had told me. It would have been helpful to know that, to know like, okay, well, I need to be prepared for potentially more rejections
Mm.
after this hurdle as well. But that doesn't mean that it's any reflection on your work. It just is what it is.
Yeah. How much, or what are some big changes that the industry has gone through since you've been involved in it? What are some of the things you've noticed the most, the big changes?
I mean, that's probably one of them for sure. Is that not hearing back from editors is definitely, I'm hearing that from everywhere. The Also the landscape of querying. When I was querying in like May 2020, um, my agent asked for my full really really quickly, and then read it, and I'd signed with her in 3 months. So mine was really really fast. And I had some interest from other people, but I really liked Laura, and I still very much like Laura. She's a wonderful person and a top-notch agent, and it felt difficult because you're querying and you will get rejections and you will have to deal with that. But at the time, it felt okay. It wasn't terrible. It was like, oh, okay, well, this is just, it's the same as submitting to literary magazines, sometimes rejections, sometimes acceptances. It felt pretty normal. Now it is like a wasteland. It is really like gone downhill because quite a lot of agents left the business during the pandemic.
Mm.
they no longer wanted to do it, or they were too snowed under, or they just, for whatever reason, they just kind of left. Um, there are new agents as well, but there are also new agents who are more junior and they don't have the same experience or the same connections. Um, and they may be building their lists, but like with kind of less experience.
Hmm.
So the advice that I would have given right after I signed with Laura is advice that is feels really outdated now.
Hmm.
Um, so before it was like, oh, query in small batches of 5 to 10 agents. And once you get to like between 50 and 100, and if you haven't had anybody, I mean, you should be getting full requests and stuff like from your query, or your query is probably not very good. But if you get to like 50 or 100, maybe just shelve the book, try it with something else. Now it's like, oh, you should expect that because
Wow.
it's just chaos. And all of my mentees are crazy talented, and at least four of them have got books that they've been querying. And I know my clients have in different genres. I know that my fiance has as well. And there may be interest, but it's just not the same. You're not seeing people being snapped up left and right. It's
Hmm.
like agents are having to be more selective because editors are being more selective, and it's just all kind of trickling down. So I don't think that was the case uh, when I was signed with Laura, and that was only September 2020. So it's really not that long ago. But it feels like a completely different ball game. So now I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna try and keep you afloat. I'll make sure your query letter is good, but like, don't put yourself down because all of the things that you see that are advice are outdated now.
Hmm. Wow. I didn't realize it had. I guess it makes sense with the pandemic and all the changes that happened during that
Hmm.
time. So
Yeah,
wow, it's a lot of changes.
yeah, it's
I
crazy.
do have a yeah, it's wild. I do have a couple more questions for you.
Hmm.
I'd like to ask all of my guests. The first one is: was there ever a hobby or a thing that you were excited to try, but when you tried it, you did not enjoy it?
Hmm. I can't knit. I don't have the patience for it. And I think I've tried to learn a couple of times, and I've just been like, I don't know if I understand this. My hands and my brain are only linked when there's a keyboard in front of me, and I think the rest of the time it's just like, d- I don't know what's happening here. Um, I bake. I'm a pretty decent baker, but I have not really made successful biscuits. I am just a cake girl. That's it. I like cakes and scones and anything like that. But like as soon as you start making biscuits, I'm like, I don't know, these are just coming out terrible. Um, they're edible, I think.
You think?
You can grimace your way through it. It's not inedible, but they're not good by any stage. So yeah, sometimes you know, just it is what it is. But yeah, no, I know that a lot of people picked up like crocheting and knitting and stuff during the pandemic, and I was like, oh, I just can't get the hang of this at all. And I'm having to focus on it a lot. I don't think I'm good at like repetitive hand movements if I'm not paying attention. So I started teaching myself how to solve a Rubik's cube instead, and that went a lot easier. So it's much easier than knitting. Uh,
And the next one was: if the zombie apocalypse started today, what would be your weapon of choice?
my bow probably. I mean, because where am I going to get a gun? I'm in Scotland. We don't have guns. What am I going to do? I could throw haggis at people. Um, so I would stick with my bow. It's the one weapon that I have in the house. You can make arrows out of sticks and things. I'm like, you could probably have a really heavy skillet, actually. That might be a good
Hmm.
secondary weapon. A real cast iron skillet. Um, so yeah, but I would probably stick with the bow. Um, I'm reasonably strong, but I have the lungs of a toddler, so I'm not running anywhere. So I'm probably best placed like high up, picking people off one by one. I am not a melee fighter. Like, I'm gonna go down if that's the case in seconds. So I'm definitely like a distance person.
Yeah, where it's safe. And Spectre
Mhm.
commented, "Cake is the best thing ever." So.
It is. It's much better than biscuits, and it's not because I can't make them, or maybe it is.
So the last question I had for you was something I think is interesting because I think this shapes people throughout their lives. But what was your first job?
I had a paper round when I was a kid, but my first actual job was working in a supermarket,
Hmm.
um, which was not terribly exciting. But the job that I had right after, I didn't work there for a super long time, but the job I had right after that was I used to work in one of the Warner Brothers studio stores.
Hmm.
Um, which was is no longer a thing in the shopping mall, like where near where I grew up. But I really enjoyed that because you got to do some pretty fun things. There were some things that were less fun about it, but there was one year that the manager just gave me a few boxes of Lego and said, like, can you go over there in the corner and build them for the Christmas display? And so I spent several shifts on the floor building Lego. And every now and again, some kids would come in with their parents. They would come over. I would give them something to build. They would build it quietly with me while their parents walked around. Then they would leave. Another child would come in. So I just spent like hours and hours building Lego with little kids, which was really fun.
Hmm.
And also, I was the right size for several of the costumes for the kids' parties. So they frequently put me in. This is for some reason this is a story that my fiance thinks is really really hilarious, and that I'm sure some people will recall with great anger. Um, they put me in a Tweety Pie costume, and if you picture Tweety Pie, he has a massive head. So
Hmm.
the head actually goes and it actually pins your upper arm. So you've only got kind of little flappy arms left. Um, and one of the things that they used to do is it was for kids' parties, but they also used to get us to go out into the shopping mall and hand out leaflets. But because it was, shall we say, a slightly rough area, someone had to go with you in case young yobs attacked Tweety Pie
Wow.
in some way. Not that anyone ever did. People were always very, very keen. But because no one knew who was inside the costume, you could play some pretty merry hell in the shopping center, and people just found it funny. And my manager didn't care because it was good for business. So I used to go into the H&M and rearrange all of their CDs in the wrong and take like all the alphabetical things and put them in different, but just pretending to be sly. But of course, everyone was looking at the 5 foot tall bird in the corner, and I would just like change all their displays and things. While the staff couldn't say anything, and they were usually found it quite funny. But then they would have to go and fix it after I'd left. But even though we would wander around and get their customers to come into our store as well. So I always wonder if anyone from that point remembers having to fix things after a Tweety Pie came in and wrecked their displays.
No one ever confronted you or asked you to stop?
I don't know if that would have been good for business. They were kind of like, "Oh, Tweety, do you have to?" And I was like, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do, because I only have tiny hands."
Did anyone ever find out it was you, or was it always a mystery?
No, there were 3 or 4 of us who were about the same height. I'm
Hmm.
about 5'5", and they were a little shorter than me, so they were never quite sure. And once I told my colleagues, they all went and did it as well, so they were never quite sure which one of us it was. It was just somebody in the Tweety Bird costume. And of course, we were always like, "Oh, I don't know who did that. It's hard to say." Hmm. I have no memory of this. It's so weird. But yeah, it was good times.
That sounds like a fun job.
Mhm.
That's a good times.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your Saturday afternoon, your time,
Mhm.
to come and hang out and chat with me.
Thank you. This was so fun. It was really nice to have. This has been a break, believe it or not,
Oh,
from
well,
the incessant grind of my life. So yeah, thank you very much.
awesome. So, if anyone wants to find out more about you or find your work, where's the best places to find you?
So I am on Twitter at Lindz McLeod, where you will find aforementioned pictures of the beautiful cats. And I also have a website, www.lindsmcleod.co.uk, where you can find information about me. You can subscribe to the newsletter. I have links to all of my work up there that you can read for free as well, and information about the forthcoming books
Hmm.
as well.
It's an awesome cover. I love that cover. Turduken. It's a
It's
great cover.
I'm really excited about it. It's really cool.
Yeah. Thanks again so much, and thanks everyone who came by to interact with us and ask questions and comments. Really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your weekend.